bringing you in-depth discussion from one of the rad groups of online writers covering the Edmonton Oilers. Are you ready for Oilers Overtime? Join us as we talk news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and more. All featured on one of the most glorified teams in the NHL. From the great one to the next one. From the boys on the bus to the decade of darkness. This is Oilers Overtime.
Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of THW Oilers Overtime. My name is Jim Parsons. I'm here with HockeyWriters.com. We got the full cast with us tonight. Colton Pankhew's back this week. Colton, how are you?
Good, Jim. Good to be back on.
Cool. And you came on for a good one. There's lots to talk about tonight. The Oilers are front and center in the news, so we're going to be talking about that pretty much for the most part of the show. Brian Swain's with us as well. Brian, how are you?
Hey, it's been a crazy day, Jim. Lots to talk about, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Let's hope everything that we do talk about isn't going to be something that by the time this airs and people get to watch it is totally old news, because it's very possible that as we record this, things are happening behind the scenes that could be different when we're finished this conversation.
And we do have a bit of a history too. So
yeah, we'd like to jinx this team, either that or we record like right after something happens or right before, and then the next day something big goes down, so we have to talk about it next week. It's just the way that works. Julian knows all about it. Julian Mongilo is with us. How are you?
I'm doing good. I got wearing my Leaf hat today just because we're coming off the win. Unfortunately, this one's not on my head. Maybe next time. All right. But I'm ready to go here.
I forgot that you made that little wager with us last week that if they beat the Leafs, that you would wear that hat.
Yeah.
And they looked like they had a chance for half a game.
Good game. Solid game by them.
And then it got away from them at the end there. But we're not going to get a chance to see what goes on here for a while because the Ottawa Senators game that was supposed to have it on Monday was postponed, and then everything else is sort of postponed. We'll talk about all that later, but we got to talk about the big news first. Let's intro this for anybody who's been under a rock for the last, 48 to 72 hours. Evander Kane put on unconditional waivers by the San Jose Sharks for the purpose of terminating his contract. He clears waivers. The San Jose Sharks go and they do terminate the contract. Now, there's more to this that could potentially go down here. We don't know if this is going to stand. We think it probably will. The NHL thinks that it will and that they've got enough grounds to do this. But the NHLP is filing agreements on behalf of Evander Kane, and his agency is also saying you guys don't have the right to do this. So there could be an arbitrator involved here, and we'll see what all goes on. For now, we're going to assume, though, that he is free and clear as a pending UFA to sign with whatever team he wants, and it's not going to be a sticky situation. Maybe there's a buyout or some sort of settlement or whatever. But Kane can sign wherever he wants. And the news is that the Edmonton Oilers are kind of leading the way here. Now, we talked a lot about whether or not this was a good fit, and it's right down the middle. Colton, I'll start with you. Where do you sit on Evander Kane? Is this a good idea for the Oilers to be involved? We know that they've technically talked to them, Dan Milstein, his agent and stuff. Do you like the idea of Evander Kane? Or are you like, no way, I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole?
I get why people are hesitant about it or don't want to. But I think just with the struggles this team's having right now and how much they struggle with just offensive depth, I think it could be a really good fit for the short term. Obviously, I think they would give him a 1-year deal. And I think when he first got to San Jose, obviously he earned that 7-year extension, I think in year 1 or 2 of being there already. So I think in the short term, I don't think there's really any issue with it. I think he tends to wear out his welcome with teams. We've seen that I think he's been on 3 or 4 teams now. But I think for the short term, he's obviously on the ice. There's a reason he's getting his, 6th, 7th, 8th chance, whatever you want to call it here, just because he is a really good player. So I think for the short term, I think just this team needs something, and I think it would be a good ad.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to dispute the fact that he's a pretty good player. He's going to score a bunch. He's big. He's fast. He can skate in your top 6, and he can produce, and he's shown that he can do that no matter where he goes and what situation he's created for himself. The question becomes, can you separate the two? Do you have to separate the two? Can you figure it out? Brian, what do you think? Is this something that the Oilers should just be totally no way, no, we finally got this figured out here, even though the record might not be as great over the last 13 games as they'd like, that the culture is pretty good, the leadership core is pretty good, and adding Evander Kane to this equation would mess it all up? Or are you the other way that it won't matter?
I've got a little bit of a different take on this. I've always kind of been in the mindset, and I know I'm in the minority as far as this goes, but as if I'm putting together as a either as a fan or if I'm someone who's assembling a team, I want to win with good people. I don't want to, bring in people who have questionable choices, questionable character just for the sake of winning. And I think this is could be a bit of a black mark against the organization just to bring in someone who has such a checkered past. We know exactly what he can bring to the team, right? He's an unbelievable player and he checks so many boxes. If they can get him on a cheap deal, which they probably will, very affordable, that makes a lot of sense. If it's a situation where he only is with the team for 4 months, you say, okay, how much damage can he do in that point in time? And if it's a cheap deal, they could just cut him. So you would hope that he wouldn't be able to, if it doesn't work out, it wouldn't go so far off the rails that it would take the team season with it. But for me, just because for me, that counts. It counts to win with good people. And I would not bring him onto my team.
Okay, I'm not going to say that I disagree with you, but I am going to play devil's advocate here for just a second, and I'm going to ask you, did you feel the same way about Zack Kassian? Now, saying that, Evander Kane, Zack Kassian, different situations, but that was kind of the rep on Kassian coming in, right? Like he had probably worked himself out of the league. He had some, alcohol issue problems. He had some behavioral problems. He had all sorts of stuff. He came to Edmonton. He played pretty good, and he sort of rehabilitated himself, and he's become a fan favorite. Not always the most consistent player in the world, but really kind of turned things around. Did you feel the same way about Zack Kassian? Could this be another Kassian? Is it totally two different situations?
I think it's two different situations. I didn't feel that way about Kassian. I think Kassian showed a lot of commitment within himself. He acknowledged he'd made mistakes in the past. He wasn't on his fourth, fifth, or sixth chance. They were different kind of problems. Kane reminds me a lot of Antonio Brown, for anyone who's a football fan. Like we've seen him just go from one team to another, problem after problem after problem. You put him on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which has the strongest culture, which is a championship team, and he's still not happy. That's kind of where I stand. But for me, apples and oranges, the Kassian situation and this.
No, that's totally fair. I just was curious because I know that that's the argument that some people are making, right? Like there's a lot of people who agree with you that this is Kane's so far gone in terms of the amount of chances that he's had that he doesn't deserve another one. And then there's other people who are like, look, they did it with Kassian. They should be able to do it with Kane, but two different players. You're right. Okay, so if I hear this right, Colton's kind of like, you know what, you need to add the scoring. You need to do what you can. Brian's like, yeah, he's a good player, but I wouldn't do this. It's not a greatest idea. So Julian, are you the tiebreaker here? Where are you going with this
I guess I'm the tiebreaker, but I'm very on the fence too. I mean, I'm probably with the majority of people, but like to add a player like that is exactly what they need. Like Brian was saying, the fit is there, and the effect it would have on the lineup to be able to bump everybody down is exactly what we were talking about, of getting a second line player that you're bumping everybody down to a third line, right? Or top 6-4 that bumps everybody down, right? So that means Puljujärvi probably goes down a line, and Moto on the third, which makes them a lot deeper. In order to fit that on, I'm not sure what kind of cap situation they're going to have to do. I would assume some contracts are going to have to be moved out if they would. I would assume it's going to be more than $1 million to take him on a 1-year deal. And I don't think it's going to be anything more than that. I think that they do have the pieces that they can change him or at least accommodate him for the time being, if it is a short-term deal, which is why I kind of like it. I just don't think that the timing is right for the Oilers. I think to bring in a polarizing figure like that, high emotions, and, different attitude, I guess, or different outlook on life. I think with the way the Oilers are now and have been for the last couple of games, it's just the timing is not right for me. I think if they would have did this back before this 13-game losing, issue, then I would be all on board. But just because of how fragile the team is and the locker room is, I think it could be an issue.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Go ahead, Brian.
No. So I want to throw this out there to you guys, and I think Julie just answered this question. But do you think the culture on this team is strong enough right now to handle whatever may come its way in taking on Kane?
I would say there are two different responses here. One, there's the reality of what they are, and then there's what they think they are, right? Because I don't think Ken Holland does this without running it past Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Darnell Nurse, Duncan Keith, Mike Smith, all those guys. They're not going near Evander Kane if those guys don't say, yeah, we're in. Like, yeah, we can handle this. We think that we're strong enough as a leader, even though our record sucks over the last however many games. We think we can handle this. Now, that might be different than whether or not they actually can, right? Like, he might get in there and be so bad and so divisive.
That's my fear.
That it isn't, no matter what you do, no matter how. But in that situation, I'm still kind of like, okay, well, then he's just going to get booted, right? Yeah. My bigger concern is, what if this isn't a 1-year deal? Like, nobody's taken time to think about that, right? Like,
is this Ken Holland we're talking about?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, everybody's under the assumption here, like, Julian said a $1 million deal. Well, Tuukka Rask signed with Boston today for $1 million. It's about $584,000 is the prorated amount of that contract. That's what we're talking about with Kane here. But what if Ken Holland says, well, hey, I'm like he did it with Hyman, right? Give the guy 7 years. What if he's competing with Tampa Bay or Florida and he says, the only way I do this is if I get a 2 or 3 year deal? That's a huge mistake for me, right? Like, I don't mind Kane on a 1 year, 1.2, getting $600,000-$700,000, and you can bury that if it doesn't work out and you can get rid of him right away. But man, if they sign him for 2 or 3 years, which Holland is absolutely capable of doing, right? That's where it becomes a real issue for me. Colton, did you give any thought to the idea that this could be anything more than a 1 year end of the season kind of deal?
It's funny because it makes a lot of sense, but I think just seeing everything on Twitter, you kind of just assume it's a 1 year, right?
Yeah. That's what I mean. Everybody's assuming it is, right? Yeah. Show me contract. Evander Kane's got a chance to, rehabilitate himself. Why would you want a long-term deal? But yeah, who knows, right?
Like, the two teams are competing against are Tampa and Florida. So obviously those are two big-time cup contenders. So it's
and better destinations in terms of living.
The only thing I was thinking was like the McDavid factor, just playing with him, that could help Kane next offseason if it is to be a 1 year deal.
Well, consider they're also tax-free, right? Yeah. So Kane he gets all that money, right? Which, I don't know. I don't want to be whatever, but the well-documented story about Kane's financials is that he needs all that money, right? So I don't know.
I don't know. I think that the McDavid factor might trump it overall, because I don't think any of those teams is going to hand out multi-year deals. I don't think either of them do that.
I don't think they will, but I'm not sure the Edmonton Oilers won't. Colton, go ahead. Finish what you were going to say there. You were going to say something about McDavid.
Yeah, I mean, just like the McDavid factor, I think I had read something today that McDavid might have even reached out to him. So I think that helps. But yeah, like you said, if it's a multi-year deal, then I don't think there's any way you can do that. I think he's shown when he's come to teams, like I said before, in the short term, I think he's fine. And that's why San Jose gave him that big extension at the time. But I think if he's there for much longer than these 4 months or whatever it may be, I think that could be a huge issue going forward.
How much do fans lose their mind, Brian, if this happens? Because they've lost it on Devon Shore and they've lost it on Mike Smith. What happens if they give Evander Kane more than 1 year?
I usually have a pretty good sense of how the fans are going to react around here. I have no idea what's going to, I think it's going to be the most polarizing signing, and that's saying a lot. But it's going to be the most polarizing signing we've seen around here in a long time. I don't know. I don't know what to expect. I have no idea. This is going to be fascinating.
If it is a multi-year deal, though, where's that money coming from? That's
a good point.
That's the question, because he was already, they're already up. He was saying today, Holland, in his press conference, that they're over the cap, really. Yeah. So they're going to have to be creative to make some moves. And that means I would assume Yamamoto might be on the way out if that's the case next season, if it's a multi-year deal.
And we've talked about Yamamoto plenty, right? We don't know if he's sticking around anyway.
I guess Kassian would be automatically out at that point to save that money. But there's moves that would need to be made in order for that to make it happen on a multi-year deal.
And do you think Kane is taking a multi-year deal? Because if he is, he's probably not getting a lot, right? He's probably sacrificing that amount for term.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. If you can get him at maybe $2.5 million for 2 years or something like that, sure. But
I could see Kane taking 2 years, just because if he only takes to the end of this year, he's got absolutely nothing, right? He's got an opportunity to play with McDavid or Draisaitl, and that's pretty much it. Because if it doesn't work out, he's gone. right?
But all
like,
he has to do is behave himself for 4 months, light up the scoreboard, which is entirely possible, and then someone will give him that payday.
Oh, someone's going to do it anyway. Like, unless he just comes in here and he's such a disaster that everyone's like, oh, yeah, no way. If he can't even work it out for 4 months with those guys, then whatever. But I could also see Kane wanting a second year just to give him a little bit of a guaranteed contract of some kind. If you buy him out or you move him, or he's going to get paid, right? Like, I don't know. I really honestly don't know. Like, we could wake up when this video airs on Wednesday morning and find out that he signed just the 1 year that everybody's hoping it is, or it's multi-year and we'll all be like, oh my gosh, what the heck is going on now? Like,
keep tabs on your Twitter.
Colton, what did you think of the press conference this morning with Ken Holland and his comments? One, he talked and he confirmed that he's spoken with Dan Milstein about Evander Kane. So we know that the Oilers are interested. That's for sure. There's been plenty of reports about them being a front runner too here. So we'll see what happens there. But he also made comments about, like, he's sticking with Mike Smith and Mikko Koskinen. He's not going after a rental. What else did he talk about? Oh yeah, like, he's not firing Dave Tippett, right? Like that, those things he pretty much confirmed in his conference this morning. What did you make of Holland's comments?
I think the Tippett thing makes sense. I think we've all kind of said that on here, that you can only go through so many coaches. It's not really a coaching issue at this point. I think in terms of the goaltending, I think that was frustrating to hear. Just that he said he wants to see this tandem get healthy before he really makes any moves, which that is the issue. Is Smith's almost 40 years old now, and Koskinen really hasn't shown anything. So I think the fact that he still at least appears, I mean, he could just be saying that too, but he seems pretty confident in this tandem still and seems okay with leaving Skinner in the minors, which I think is concerning given the struggles they've had to this point. So from that regard, it was pretty disappointing, I thought.
Well, nobody's probably more disappointed than Brian, because if that's the case and Stuart Skinner is not coming up here anytime soon, I mean, an injury of some kind would obviously create a different situation. Although I read today, I think Michael Russo of The Athletic that covers Minnesota said Alex Stalock's on his way back to Bakersfield. So, I mean, he's going to be part of this equation too if he's healthy, right? He was cleared. He had the heart kind of thing going on with the COVID stuff and the complications from that, but I guess he's good to go now. So he's coming back to Bakersfield and we'll see where that fits. I don't know, but so no Stuart Skinner for you probably. So what does that say?
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing I am really, as much as a mess of this creates, I'm thrilled to hear Alex Stalock might get to play again. I know we all thought that his career might be over. So if he's able to come back, whether it's with the Oilers or somewhere else, that's great to hear. But yeah, I started work on an article, and well, hopefully by Wednesday morning it'll be ready to go. But I haven't really been able to articulate the absurdity of Holland's comments on the goalie situation this morning. Like, he just seemed, what he said, and Colton alluded to it here, he is so in on, like, you can see he's just got his blinders on. He's stubbornly sticking with Smith and Koskinen. I think we know, I mean, we don't even know if Smith can play from one game to the next. No disrespect to the guy, but he's 40 years old and his body's breaking down. It's been breaking down for a season and a half now. Koskinen is what he is. We know what he is, and that's not a guy who can carry the mail every night. Skinner has done everything you've asked of him. He's performed to the level you'd want him to in the NHL. He's ready to go. And it's like and Holland was making some comments today, like, well, they'd rather have guys this will be my words here, but he'd rather have them overripe or whatever, right? Than bring them up too soon. Skinner's proven he can play in the NHL now. He's gotten into 11 games this season. He's 23 years old. He's been in Bakersfield. This is his fourth season down there. This kid is ready to go. They need a goalie. They can't trade for one because, one, they don't have the cap space. Two, there's nobody out there. But within their organization, they may have the goalie that can turn this season around. And he, for whatever reason, is stubbornly sticking with Mike Smith and Mikko Koskinen. It just kind of...
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think what he's envisioning here is that the Smith and Koskinen tandem that he knows when they're healthy has done what he needed them to do, which is get the Oilers to the playoffs. But as you're saying, that's a pipe dream at this point, right? Is that what I'm hearing? Like, Mike Smith has proven he can't stay healthy, and Koskinen has proven he can't carry the load. So if Mike Smith's not healthy, Koskinen is no good. Yeah, it's a great idea, and it's worked maybe before, but it's probably not going to work anymore based on what we're seeing. Is that right?
Yeah, and did either one of them really get the Oilers to where they need to be? They've been, they flamed out in the first round of the playoffs the last.
But again, that wasn't really that wasn't the Goldies' fault. That playoff run wasn't their fault.
No, that's true. That's true. That's fair.
So I'll say that in their defense, and to kind of go on with that, like, I think the important thing that I took from that section of talking about when Holland was talking about the goaltending was that, you know, this tandem was the one they envisioned going into the season with, and they haven't really seen it happen. Like he was explaining that it's been one guy carrying the bulk, right? And they haven't been able to split that load, right? So I think that he wants to see what that tandem's going to do before he makes the move. He's postponing to see what he needs to do. That's what I got from that, because he hasn't seen these two guys in tandem working when the team has been running on all cylinders, which they haven't been lately. So benefit of the doubt to Koskinen because they haven't been playing well in front of him. So I think he's waiting to see that before he makes any sort of move. But I also think that with Skinner, he's protecting him from failing, because if the team is going to be like this and you're going to throw in a 23-year-old goaltender who's supposed to be the guy of the future, and he starts getting lit up or overwhelmed with the load, even though we haven't really seen him get that way, it's clearly possible if the team continues on this path that people start to bag on him and his play, even though it may not be his fault. So I think he's doing the right thing in protecting Skinner from a potential issue down the road where the fans or maybe others may not trust in what he can do.
Okay, Julian, let me ask you this then. Okay, so on one side, you've got not playing Skinner and protecting him from what could be bad play with the team in front of him, and he doesn't look so good. And then when you don't have Mikko Koskinen next year because his contract runs up and you have to decide whether or not Skinner's your guy, and he's played bad all year because of the team in front of him, that's not good. But how do you weigh that against the idea that, okay, well, maybe Skinner is your guy next year, but you don't play him in the NHL, so you don't know what's worse?
I think they know what they have with him. So I think they're less worried about his performance at the NHL level because they know he's ready. And I think it comes down to, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, but if they know what they have with him, then why aren't he protecting him? Because if he knows what he has, he shouldn't feel that he has.
I don't think he fully trusts the team in front of him, and they don't want him to get to the point where he feels like it's on his and it's his fault, or he gets down on himself moving forward, because I think they would rather have him start with a fresh slate and say, you're coming in to work in tandem with Smith next season, because Koskinen, in my eyes, isn't coming back. And I'm sure that's everybody's opinion as well. But
yeah, I think so too. And,
you know what I mean? Like, I think that's the vision of the future is Skinner with Smith and someone else in case Smith can't go or can't be healthy. And Skinner's going to get his run. And if that means, I think the taxi squad, I don't know if he's on it yet, but it should probably help him get into some games still, because I don't think Smith is going to remain healthy the rest of the year either.
Well, it sounded like his intention was to basically keep Skinner in Bakersfield.
Yeah, he's in the AHL right now, and there was no plan to bring him up, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I just think that at the end of the day, it's just for his protection. And I liked what he said about the other prospects. We know how he is about over ripening them and letting them force his hand. And I think it's just about protecting them to me. And I think that's the right move considering the state of the team is in right now.
So Colton, he pretty much ruled out any possibility. Not that there was ever a guarantee that he was going to do this, and there was just a bunch of rumors, but no confirmation. There's no Marc-Andre Fleury in the picture here. Not at all, right? Because he's not going after a rental. He's not going after a big contract. He's going to see what he's got here. If he does anything, and he won't probably do this either, he's going to go after a goalie with term, which might mean like something like Carey Price is more likely than a Marc-Andre Fleury at this point. What do you think about the fact that that's just off the table now?
I mean, I get it just with Fleury's salary and everything. It's disappointing just because, I mean, it's easy to be armchair GM here and say maybe you could put in Koskinen and whoever else to kind of even the cap out a bit, not knowing whether or not Chicago would take that. But I mean, I just think Fleury would be a really good option for this season just because he is a free agent again. You don't have to worry about that cap moving forward. Unlike a guy you said with Price, where it's kind of just a crippling contract that I think has 3 or 4 more years on it. And in terms of just rentals, I think it's just disappointing to hear that he says he's not willing to do that, despite the fact that he even alluded to McDavid's 25 now, Draisaitl's 26. It's like at some point, I think the fans are frustrated because you got to go for it. So I think it's, I get where he's coming from just because the team's in a skid right now, but I think it's disappointing to hear that he won't do moves right now to try and improve them.
Do you think that it's a mixed message, Colton, when you hear that they're going to be going after Evander Kane, which everybody's like, why would you go after that guy? But they won't go after these other guys? Or is it just about the assets? Like, yeah, McDavid's in, he's on board with Kane. Sounds like the rest of the leadership group probably is too. But then there's this baggage that comes with Evander Kane. Then you got these other guys out here that it could be rentals, Ben Sherrod, Marc-Andre Fleury, whomever else might be available. Probably no baggage, but there's assets involved in acquiring those pieces. So do you separate the two things? Is it a mixed message of some kind? Like you're only going after Kane because it costs you nothing? Like what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get where he's coming from in a way, but I can't imagine being McDavid sitting there with not much success at all in his, I think he's in his 7th season now and has a few years left on his contract, and his GM saying he's preaching patience with these prospects, which are still a couple years away. So it's like by the time these guys are ready, all of a sudden your window is basically closed. McDavid's contract's up, Draisaitl's contract's up. If they stay like this, I don't see any reason why either of those guys sign back again. So I think at some point you have to be willing to move on from those prospects and make the team better right now. And I know it's easier said than done, but there's other teams and other GMs out there that have found ways to to get it done. And I think he needs to do that.
Yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is if McDavid and Draisaitl and Nurse and those guys are in on Evander Kane, you'd think if they're willing to make that sacrifice, and I don't know if they know Kane, if they're friends with Kane, or if they whatever, I'm assuming they understand that there's a risk involved here. They're like, yes, let's go for it. He's what we need. He's a left winger. He's going to score. He's going to help us. Yeah, we understand what comes with him, but we're willing to take that risk. But then you don't go after the other pieces you need. You need a left defenseman. You need a goalie. You need other things. I'm just thinking to myself, okay, what does that tell them? It's like, okay, they want to win, so they're willing to add Evander Kane, but they also want to add these other guys to give themselves an even better chance of winning. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I mean, for all that we know, when this goes live for people to watch, Evander Kane is signed with Tampa. We have no idea, right? Like, we'll see where this ends up. One more topic before we, go back to finishing things off in the next week. Brian, I wanted to ask you about the COVID stuff. So I have a question for you guys, and I'll get everybody's take on this. Is it good that the Oilers are getting all these viruses now? Like, you never want anybody to get sick. But look what happened with Calgary. They all got sick at the same time, and they all got healthy at the same time. And then you don't get to get tested for like another 3 months after you test positive for COVID. So is it good that the Oilers are hitting this string of COVID positive tests? Their games have been postponed. Most of these guys are going to be back when they finally do play again. I'm a little concerned that, like, I don't want to, like I said, don't want to ever wish anybody gets this, but Draisaitl doesn't have it. Hyman hasn't got it. They're going to probably get it. Like, that's just the reality of it. When that happens, the Oilers will be playing again. So they don't have those guys. What do you think of this whole thing? Like the absences, the COVID, like should the Oilers just all get it at the same time and then be healthy again?
Yeah. Well, all your points there are pretty valid. The other, I'll take a look at it from another perspective here too, is the timing of this coming when they're in such a disastrous slump and basically getting into a portion now of the schedule where they go a week and a half without a game. And I think it's one game over a course of 2 weeks. Is that a good thing? Did they need this kind of reset, this break to kind of regroup and they'll come back out on fire, or is, would they have rather been out there right away? As far as who's available goes, I mean, I think, with McDavid going into protocol last week and you only missed him for one game, that's probably about as good as you could have hoped for. Yeah, you're right, though. It's kind of scary to think that, these guys have almost had to embrace the inevitable that everyone is going to get it at some point in time.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't ever want anybody to get it. That's certainly not what I'm trying to say here. But when you look at Vancouver, you look at, Calgary, you look at these guys, and the NHL postponed all their games because they didn't have a roster. They couldn't play. And so then they held off their games, and the guys get healthy and they're all back together, and they don't have any more bodies going out of the lineup. The Oilers aren't in that situation. Leading up the last few games, they've lost piece after piece, one guy at a time, a couple guys at a time. And when they come back, they might have the same thing happen if guys like Draisaitl and Hyman don't catch it in the next day or two. So, I mean, it's a weird thing to be asking for. I certainly don't, you know what I mean? It sounds terrible to say it that way, but yeah. It's kind of like, are the Oilers not catching a break here? Like, it's a terrible excuse, but like, is it kind of unfair that some of these teams are all getting sick at the same time and they're all coming back healthy at the same time when their games kick in again? And then the Oilers are sort of piece by piece by piece by piece losing bodies, and they're out a couple guys. Julian, what do you think of this?
So are they actually not testing that player at all after they've tested positive?
Apparently that's the rule.
That's the rule.
Once you've tested positive,
then that's
quarantined and you return 3 months before you're tested again.
That's huge. I didn't know that, actually. So that changes, like, that's pretty significant heading into playoffs, especially down the stretch and stuff like that, because That could make or break your team. I mean, at the end of the day, hockey is all sports are going to be like that, where it's going to be who's healthy at the end. Who's to say someone can't get a season-ending injury and you're out, right?
Crazy. You know what's crazy is that could almost be like bump up somebody's trade value. Like, yeah, I've had the positive. You know, I'm not. You don't got to
test me. So I'm in the lineup.
If you trade for me, there's no way I'm sitting out. Now, having said that, I saw Elliot Friedman wrote it, and that's where I'm getting this information from. He put it in one of his articles. But that said, David's now had it twice. When was the first time he had it? How long ago was that?
I think he had it.
Was it 3 months ago?
Yeah, it was the summer and like off season.
The summer 2020 before.
Yeah, the first time it came.
So it's been that long, right? Like it feels like it hasn't been that long, but
I know everything's jumbled together these days. But I mean, it definitely adds value knowing that. And I think that, you know, when things go bad, they just go worse. And it's kind of piling on for them now, but I think they're going to start to get bodies back. And I think you could kind of say they've caught a break, considering they, like Brian said, the schedule has been in their favor with all these absences. So at least you can kind of offset who's got it with who doesn't, if the other guys do get it. And hopefully the other guys can just carry the load. And I think that's just comes down to the depth of your roster. And I think that like last season, having a deep roster is going to be the difference this year.
Yeah. It's just a really interesting, like the whole year, the season's been goofy, right? Like, it's just, what do you do with this? Like, everybody's losing players here and there, and some all at the same time, and some in a massive string. Like, the Oilers got hit pretty hard the last week or two.
Yeah.
And it's just like name after name after name after name. And as terrible as that is, it's almost a plus, right? To know that all your guys are going down. You're losing games because of attendance issues, and it just so happens that your guys are sick while that's happening. So I guess it's a good thing that they're going to be healthy when it comes back, but you know, it's a bummer that these guys are getting sick. Fortunately, I suppose nobody's really tested with any symptoms. So that's the good news too, right? All right. So I don't know. There's no games to predict here. There's nothing coming up here. We can't predict any scores. So let's do this. Let's say Golden the next 5. So when the Oilers kick back in here, because the idea here, Ken Holland said at the presser, he thinks they're going to start winning. He truly believes in this group. He believes in the locker room. He believes in the leadership core, and he thinks that they'll win because they've been competitive. They just haven't been able to put the points up. What do you think the Oilers do in the next 5 games?
Assuming they're healthy, like especially McDavid, Draisaitl, I do think the time off, I think sometimes losing and going to the rink every day is taxing. So I think just getting away from it for a while will help them. And I do think they'll come back a lot stronger. So I'll say they win 4 of their next 5.
They certainly could use it. Brian, what do you figure?
I'll be honest here. Everything's been so jumbled up and kicked down the road. I don't even know who. I know they're playing the Sens on Saturday.
Yeah, I got it right here.
Sens,
so Sens, Panthers, Flames, Canucks, Preds. Those are the next 5.
Those are all at home?
1, 2, 3, 4 of the 3. The Canucks one's away.
I will say 3-1-1. Yeah, it's tough because these are teams that have been playing pretty good. Like, Florida's Florida, so they're pretty good. Vancouver's hot right now. Calgary's been surprisingly better than everybody thinks, and the Predators are better than everybody thinks. Like, it's been an interesting group there that they're facing off. Ottawa, we would hope, is a team they can beat. But we'll see. Julian, what do you figure? What's the record going to be in the next 5?
I don't know why. I just have a funny feeling looking ahead to the Ottawa game that it might be an overtime loss. I'm not sure why I feel that. I just think maybe they might come out a little sluggish, and Ottawa's kind of a pesky team. So considering that, I think I'm going to say 2-2-1.
Well, I'm going to try to be favorable here and at least say they're above 500 when this happens. So I'll go 3-2 just because, like everybody said, they're going to be rested. They're going to be motivated. I don't, let's go right on a limb here. And let's say Evander Kane's part of the lineup when this happens. That changes a lot, right? Like, put him in your top 6 and you got a motivated guy who could score, who should be rested. You know what I mean? Like, he's been playing in Barracuda, but like, should be interesting. I don't know. We'll see if it all turns out. But thanks, guys. I appreciate it. We were talking about maybe having so much to talk about that we might have to split this episode into 2, but we were able to cram it all into just over half an hour. So worked out really well. For everybody watching, just a couple of reminders, though. You can follow us in a few ways. Go to the Hockey Writer on Twitter, facebook.com/thehockeywriters. You can sign up for the morningskate.io newsletter. Check out all these guys' work on the hockeywriters.com. There's tons of articles coming up here. So much to talk about. There's something coming out every day. So check it out. And Julian's with covering Toronto too. So lots to go through. Thanks for joining us. When you watch this, let's hope that there's not so much news that everything we just talked about is totally irrelevant. It could be. That could be how this goes. But thank you. Another edition of THW Oilers Overtime. We will talk to you guys next week.